Ieuan and the Fleece, Part 1, Chapter 2, Cadno. They had started their journey by first heading for the coast. From there, Cadno and his mentor sailed from the north coast of Lesser Britain to the south coast of Greater Britain, landing on the sheltered side of a long spit of land reaching out into the sea, Portland Bill. From here, the paths led north. They walked each day, telling and retelling the stories that were their livelihood, Cadno adding to his store of tales bit by bit. Each night they stopped at a village, where they were made welcome by the folk hungry for news and stories. Some villages might get a second or even third evening of entertainment, particularly if the hospitality were good or the weather especially foul. Eventually they came to the great River Severn, or Severn Sea, where they headed east and continued their journey. In his 21st year, Cadno decided to say goodbye to his master, and that spring, when they reached the Severn, instead of heading east, he took the short boat trip across the water and entered Cymru. Not that it was called Cymru then. The Welsh language was still in its infancy. The ferry cost him not only a story for the ferryman, but also one of the precious silver pennies he had sometimes earned from those he and his master had entertained. From that year on, Cadno stayed within Cymru. He spent the darkest days of winter with Lord Adda in the south, who he had first met years ago on the south side of the Severn Sea, and who had become his winter patron. Adda held land where the River Usk met the Severn, and Cadno always started his journey travelling up the Usk. From shortly after midwinter he travelled north, and from midsummer he travelled south again. His route covered over 300 miles each year, north from the coast upriver, then across to the west coast, where he headed north again, eventually reaching Ynys Môn, where he took a boat across the strait to the island where Druids had once lived. The return journey was inland, getting back to Adda's Hall in time for the midwinter festival. Cadno was no longer a young man. It was nearly 20 years since he had started his own journey through Cymru, and he was now in his 40th year. He had visited Ieuan's village every year, and his face was recognised by all of the gathering people. Everyone in the village knew that either tonight or tomorrow there would be a gathering in the big round house, and they would get to hear a story. Cadno usually stayed more than one night at each village he visited, occasionally 3 nights if the weather turned bad, or if his visit coincided with a festival of some sort. Ieuan watched and saw Brab come out of the big house and walk toward the gate, where he met Cadno with a fond handshake. "Welcome back, Cadno," he said warmly. "What tales do you us of the world this year?" The two of them walked back to the big house and went inside, talking as they walked. A little while later, Brab emerged and called loudly across the village. "Tonight, Cadno will tell us tales. Gather in the big house at sunset." Cadno had a new tale for the village tonight, an epic that he had heard when he was young, living in the far south beyond the British Sea, the land that the Romans had called Gaul. He had found more of it in his travels with his old master, and during his years walking through Cymru, he had crafted his own telling of one of the oldest stories we know. He had told the tale already several times since he had left Adda, and tonight Ieuan's village would hear it. Ieuan shut the gate of the small paddock against the stockade wall where the sheep would spend the night, making sure that it was fixed securely. It would be worse than trouble for him if the sheep were to escape in the night. Even within the palisade, a watch would be kept ensuring their safety, but night watch in the village did mean that the watcher could sleep, so long as they slept lightly. The visitor had already emerged from the main house by the time Ieuan had settled the sheep. He walked across the village and joined the group gathered around the visitor. Brab was again speaking to the man who Ieuan knew as Cadno the storyteller. He had come to the village every year since he could remember. Cadno spent a short time speaking to some of the villagers. The older ones knew him well. Then Brab gestured him inside again, telling the people that their good guest needs food and drink before he would be telling them tales, and needed to rest his legs after his day of walking. The whole village was squeezed into the big house that evening. Everyone had eaten well. Big cups of mead were being passed around as if it were a festival, which in some ways Cadno's visits were. The fire burned brightly enough to light all but the furthest edges of the roundhouse, and as the chatter slowly died down, Cadno started to speak.